At 6:32 in the morning, I woke to the sound of rushing water that didn't belong. For a second, I thought maybe a pipe had burst, maybe something inside the house had cracked overnight. But when I stepped out onto my back deck in my slippers, coffee still steaming in my hand, the sight below made me freeze. My pool shimmered under the pale morning light, and draped across the fence like a giant snake was a bright orange hose running straight into my deep end. And there, gripping the other end like she was leading a parade, stood Karen. That's how it started. But what I didn't know then, what none of my neighbors knew, was that her obsession with controlling me would end with her screaming soaked to the bone in handcuffs in front of the sheriff himself. Karen wasn't just any neighbor. She was the self-appointed enforcer of our HOA, or at least that's how she styled herself. Hair tied back like she was reporting for military duty robe, belted so tightly it looked painful. Jaw clenched as if the whole world needed correcting. She didn't see me at first. She was too busy muttering about bylaws, property values, and how my unsanctioned aquatic hazard was dragging the neighborhood down. I stood there sipping my coffee, letting the absurdity wash over me. This was a grown woman who had woken up before dawn to siphon water out of a pool that wasn't hers. My pool. Morning, Karen. I finally called down, calm, measured, just loud enough. She jerked like she'd been caught stealing, almost tumbling into the water right there. Then she straightened, squared her shoulders, and threw on that mask of authority she always wore. "The board has decided your pool poses a liability," she declared, voice ringing with false confidence. "I'm taking care of it before someone gets hurt." I reminded her like I had before that my property wasn't under HOA jurisdiction, it was grandfathered out. She hated that fact, like oxygen hates fire. "Jurisdiction is flexible when safety is at stake," she snapped. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about a hose, this was war. I could have stormed down, ripped the hose away, maybe even called the cops right then. But that's not my style. Karen thrived on confrontation, on yelling at fences and writing up imaginary citations. What she couldn't handle was silence. So I turned, walked inside, and let her think she'd won. Through the blinds, I watched her strut back across her lawn like she'd just liberated France. And that's when I started documenting. Cameras, notes, photos, every little trespass. I wasn't going to fight her battle on her stage. I was going to build my case brick by brick until she collapsed under her own weight. Of course, she escalated fast. The next morning, she was out again this time, armed with a clipboard, a disposable camera, and a tape measure swinging from her wrist like a sheriff's badge. She crouched at the fence, snapping photos like she was cataloging a crime scene. I filmed her from behind the blinds, time-stamped every ridiculous pose. Then came the neon orange notice taped to my mailbox, "Unsafe pool. Conditions removal required." Signed, Karen, Acting President, HOA. I laughed out loud. There was no acting president. There was no authority. She just made it up. I saved it, filed it, added it to the growing binder. Neighbors started to clue me in. Dan down the street said she'd tried to force him to repaint his garage door 3 times in 2 months. Lisa told me Karen once accused her rose bushes of unauthorized foliage expansion. Turns out I was just her latest project. The difference was I wasn't technically under her jurisdiction. That made me irresistible prey. Things reached a boiling point at a simple barbecue. Friends, burgers, kids splashing in the shallow end. Within 20 minutes, Karen stormed out filming with her phone, barking accusations over the fence. "This is a violation. This is an unsanctioned gathering." My guests froze mid-bite, staring at her like she was halftime entertainment. She called the sheriff on speaker, reporting an illegal pool party. When the deputy showed up, she dragged him to my backyard like she was prosecuting a case. "This pool is a danger, a nuisance, a violation of multiple codes," she shouted. Calmly, I handed him my folder photos, videos, timestamps, even her neon orange notice. He flipped through it, nodded, and finally looked at her. "Ma'am, this property isn't under HOA jurisdiction. He hasn't broken any laws. In fact, it looks like you've been trespassing." Her face was priceless. like someone who thought she was holding a royal flush only to find out she'd been playing Uno the whole time. But humiliation didn't slow her down. If anything, it made her more desperate. Flyers appeared in mailboxes warning that my pool was infested with mold and mosquitoes. She even faked a lawyer's letter demanding I drain it in 10 days or face legal action. I called the firm listed at the top. They'd never heard of her. Forgery. That's when I realized this wasn't HOA drama anymore. This was criminal. I added the letter to my binder, called the sheriff again, and kept waiting for the breaking point. Then she struck harder. One morning, I found my pool cover slashed, hanging in tatters like a gutted sail. Later, a bag of fertilizer dumped into the water, turning it a sickly green overnight. That was the moment I nearly gave in. Standing by the pool, breathing in the chemical stink, I felt my resolve crack. What if she was right? What if this wasn't worth it? I considered draining the pool myself just to end it all. For a minute I wondered if I was the problem, but then I remembered Lisa's roses, Dan's garage door, the way she bullied anyone she could. This wasn't about the pool, it was about control, and if I surrendered, she'd never stop. That thought lit the fire back inside me. I wasn't going to be her next victim. I was going to end this, so I set the trap. High-def cameras, motion-triggered lights, everything linked to my phone. And sure enough, one night at 2 a.m, the alerts went off. Karen, dressed head to toe in black, creeping into my yard like a cartoon burglar carrying a pump. I filmed as she tried to siphon water, cursing under her breath, nearly falling in. The footage was gold. When I showed the sheriff, he just shook his head. "That's it," he said. "We'll take it from here." But still, Karen wasn't done. 2 nights later, she came back with reinforcements. 2 gullible neighbors carrying buckets and flashlights. Their planned force open my pool pump and drain it dry. I lay in bed watching it all live on my phone. When the floodlights blazed to life, the 2 recruits bolted, dropping everything. But Karen, stubborn as ever, stood frozen by the pump, crowbar in hand. And then the wail of sirens cut through the night. Deputies were already circling after her last stunt. They pulled into my driveway just as Karen tried to bark orders. "Keep going. Don't stop." But her voice cracked. Her power was gone. The sheriff stepped out of his cruiser, looking older, tired, but solid. "Ma'am," he said. Voice low, steady. "Final. You've been warned. You've been cited, and now you've been caught in the act of property damage. You need to come with us." For a split second, I thought she might swing the crowbar just to prove a point, but then it clattered to the ground, useless. She screamed, "You can't do this. I am the acting president. I am protecting this community." But no one believed her anymore. Neighbors peeked out from their windows, shaking their heads. Dan even stepped outside. Arms crossed. About time, he muttered loud enough for her to hear. And that was it. Deputies cuffed her, led her to the cruiser, her shouts fading behind slammed doors and flashing lights. That's where it ended. No confetti, no celebrations. Just silence. My pool, once a battleground, reflected the red and blue lights as they disappeared down the street. Karen's empire of bylaws and bullying crumbled the second her obsession tipped into crime. And me, I just stood there on my deck, coffee mug in hand, knowing one thing for sure: people like Karen don't drown you outright. They gnaw, they chew, they wear you down until their own madness finally pulls them under. Lesson learned. Patience will outlast tyranny every single time.